It started with a message, short, casual, gutting. I was in the sunroom, the light just beginning to soften as late afternoon leaned into evening. A cup of chamomile steamed next to my knitting, half-finished rows of what was supposed to be a baby blanket, though God knows if I'd ever be given the honor of handing it over. The ping of my phone interrupted the silence. I picked it up, expecting maybe a grocery promotion or a group text from the local church ladies. Instead, it was Katana. "Hi, Liana. Just a quick note. We're keeping Mother's Day really small this year. Just immediate family. Hope you understand." Katana. The breath left my body in a single quiet exhale. Just immediate family. I read it again, as if the words might reshape themselves into something more gentle, something less calculated. But they didn't. They stayed sharp, clinical, a cut dressed up in pastel emojis and lowercase cheer. It took a moment before the sting set in fully. 5 years. Valerio and Katana had been married 5 years. And in all that time, not once had I made waves. I was never the pushy mother-in-law, never inserted myself where I wasn't welcome. I gave them space when they asked, advice only when prompted, and support, emotional and otherwise, without question. I played my part with quiet dignity, even when I saw Katana for what she was, a strategist disguised as a daughter-in-law. But this was war in lowercase. Katana had always been careful, I'll give her that. She never outright disrespected me. No, her tactics were subtler, invitations that came too late, questions answered with condescension, her uncanny ability to recenter every conversation onto herself within 3 sentences. But this message stripped away all pretense. She didn't consider me family. Worse, Valerio didn't. That truth sat heavier than any betrayal, because whatever faults Katana had, my son had always been my anchor. My boy, my miracle, the one I raised alone after Enzo left us in a flurry of debt and betrayal. I hadn't just been a mother to Valerio. I had been everything: teacher, nurse, therapist, cheerleader. I took night shifts and cleaned houses while he slept upstairs. I packed lunches with notes tucked inside, sold my grandmother's pearls to pay his college deposit, clapped loudest at every award ceremony I had given him my entire life on a silver platter. And now he couldn't even spare me a seat at brunch. Something cold began to bloom behind my ribs. I stood up, my tea forgotten, and walked with purpose to the desk in the hallway. The drawer stuck a little, it always did, and I yanked it open with more force than necessary. Inside, a check already lay on the blotter, made out for $1,500, May's contribution to their mortgage. I'd been doing it monthly since their wedding, quietly, reliably. I'd even adjusted my own lifestyle to accommodate it. No more weekend trips, a smaller grocery budget. Not because they asked me to, but because that's what family does. Family! I sat down slowly, staring at the check. My own name neatly signed at the bottom. Liana Bellini. The same name on Valerio's birth certificate. The same name Katana couldn't be bothered to include in her immediate family roster. I picked up the check and, without ceremony, tore it clean down the middle. The sound was quiet, almost satisfying. Then I tore it again, and again, until the pieces sat like snowflakes in my lap. Let them figure it out. Let them answer to the bank when the numbers stop adding up. Let them learn what it means to erase someone who was once the foundation beneath their feet. I stood, heart hammering, and walked the fragments to the trash. The sound they made as they hit the bottom of the bin was soft, but final. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but what would tears accomplish? I'd wasted enough tears on people who mistook kindness for weakness. I would not give Katana the satisfaction of knowing she'd wounded me, because underneath this aching, raw sorrow was a heat I hadn't felt in years. Anger. And anger, when channeled correctly, can be the most productive force in the world. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, slicing the darkness above me, thinking back on every Mother's Day I'd poured my soul into. The crafts Valerio made in elementary school that I still kept in a box in the closet. The time he spent a whole week's allowance to buy me carnations from the gas station when he was 14. Even last year, how he forgot the actual day, but called 3 days later, with a shaky voice and apologies. I forgave him, of course, because I always did. But now I saw the pattern. Not just forgetfulness, not just Kitana's cold grip on the family narrative, but a slow, steady unraveling of the thread that once bound us. This wasn't an oversight. This was a decision, and I'd made one too. As dawn crept in, painting the curtains with a soft pink light, I felt something settle in me. Not peace. No, not yet. But clarity. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't irrelevant. And I certainly wasn't going to keep funding a life from which I'd been systematically excluded. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking portal. I hovered over the scheduled payments section, found the recurring mortgage transfer labeled V&K Household, and clicked Cancel. Just like that. Then I leaned back and waited. Because sooner or later, the consequences always come home. And next Sunday, when they gather around Kitana's mimosa pitcher and toast to mothers, I hope they feel my absence like a missing tooth. I hope they choke on their eggs Benedict wondering why the payment didn't go through. I hope they understand, finally, that when you tell a mother she's not family, you might just find out what happens when she agrees. The call came Monday morning. I hadn't even finished my coffee. It was one of those sharp, abrupt rings that seemed louder than usual, as if it carried the tone of the caller. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me already knew. Hello? Mom. His voice was clipped, cold. Valerio had inherited that tone from his father, the one he used when things didn't go his way. I hadn't heard it in years, not since he was a teenager, and I refused to buy him a motorcycle with the college savings I'd scraped together. Yes, I said, steadying my breath. Did you cancel the mortgage payment? There it was. No hello, no good morning, no inquiry into my health or whether I'd slept well. Straight to the point, like I was an employee who'd missed a deadline. I did, I said, calm as glass. The silence on the other end was sharp, taut with disbelief. What do you mean you did? I mean exactly what I said, Valerio. I canceled it. There was a beat. Then, why would you do that? We were counting on it. You promised. I promised, I cut in gently, because I believed I was part of something. I believed I was supporting family. But apparently, I was wrong. Wait, what is this about? That text Kitana sent? I could hear the disbelief morphing into exasperation, and beneath it, something worse. Dismissal. That same tone he used when I warned him Kitana was playing games long before he saw it. Yes, Valerio, that text. The one that said, just immediate family. That was the final straw. Are you serious? He snapped. You're actually punishing us because Kitana used the wrong wording? It wasn't the wording, I said. It was the meaning. The message was loud and clear. I'm not family to you anymore. Not in your hearts, not in your home. And I won't bankroll a life I'm not part of. This is petty, he growled. We've been relying on that payment. You should have thought of that, I said coolly, before excluding me from a day meant to honor mothers. The line went dead, just like that. No goodbye. I stared at the phone for a moment. Then I set it down, walked to the sink, and finished rinsing my coffee mug. My hands were steady. That surprised me. But the peace didn't last long. Kitana's messages started 20 minutes later. Wow. Really mature, Liana. This is emotional blackmail. You're trying to make us suffer to feel important. You have no idea how hard Valerio's working. He's under so much pressure, and now you've added to it. We're coming by this evening. We need to talk, face to face. That last one made me pause. It wasn't a request. It was a warning. By 6 p.m., the car pulled up. Her gleaming SUV, fresh from a detailing, parked slightly over the curb like she owned the street. I watched from the living room as Kitana stepped out first, wrapped in a trench coat cinched at the waist, her lipstick too bold for the occasion. Valerio followed, less put together, hair uncombed, the collar of his shirt askew. He looked like a man summoned to a war he didn't want to fight. I opened the door before they could knock. "Come in." They entered without pleasantries. Kitana went straight to the kitchen, pulling out a chair like she was in her own home. Valerio stood near the window, arms crossed. "I want to be very clear," Kitana began, her voice sharp as cut glass. "We didn't mean to exclude you from anything. That message was shorthand. It wasn't personal." "It felt personal," I said. "It wasn't," she snapped. "You're twisting it. We've had a lot on our plate. Valerio's job, the renovations, trying to maybe start a family. And now you're cutting off our mortgage support over a text? You're punishing us." "Kitana," I said softly, "I don't need a villain. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply drawing a line." Valerio finally spoke. "Mom, come on. You know we're under pressure. You always said you'd help. Now you're pulling the rug out from under us?" I turned to face him fully. "I said I'd help because I believed I was part of your life, not a wallet with a pulse. That's what I feel like now. You think I didn't notice how Kitana avoids inviting me to family events? How you stopped calling unless it was about money? You think I didn't notice how I've become optional?" He said nothing. Kitana shook her head. "This is unbelievable. You're throwing a tantrum because we didn't invite you to brunch?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm reclaiming my dignity." That stunned them both. "I've let myself be used," I continued, "for 3 years. I gave because I love my son, because I wanted to ease your burden. But love without respect is charity, and I am not a charity case. You can't tell me I'm not immediate family and then ask for my money." Valerio ran his hand over his face. "This doesn't feel like you, Mom." "I know," I said, "because I've always said yes, always made excuses, always swallowed the hurt. But not anymore." Kitana stood. "Fine, if that's how you want to play it." "It's not a game," I said. "It's my life, and I'm done living it on your terms." They left not long after. No apologies, no hugs, just tight-lipped silence and the squeal of tires as Kitana backed out of the driveway too fast. I stood at the window for a while after they left. My reflection looked different. Older, yes, but steadier, stronger. I'd expected to feel regret. I didn't, because for the first time in a very long time, I hadn't backed down. And if Kitana thought that was the end of it, she had no idea what was coming next. It was Tuesday afternoon when I became the villain of someone else's story. I had just returned from the grocery store, arms full of fresh herbs and a loaf of crusty sourdough, when my phone began vibrating nonstop in my purse. Not calls, notifications, dozens of them, pings from Facebook, texts from acquaintances I hadn't heard from in months, even a few emails. At first, I thought someone had died. But no. Something far worse had happened. Kitana had gone public. The post had already amassed over 70 comments and 100 likes. A photo of her and Valerio smiling in front of their house, arms around each other, captioned in her usual performative tone. "It's heartbreaking when someone you've welcomed into your life turns against you. We never thought we'd have to face financial manipulation from family. But here we are. When love is used as a weapon and generosity comes with strings, it's not love at all. It's control. Some people just can't stand to see their children happy and independent. We're choosing peace. We're choosing boundaries. We're choosing to protect our energy. Sao family drama, house boundaries, Dao toxic behaviors." My hands went cold. In 5 polished saccharine paragraphs, she'd turned me into a monster. She didn't mention my name. She didn't have to. Everyone in our circle knew who paid their mortgage. Everyone knew I was Valerio's only living parent. And she was cunning enough to disguise the venom as empowerment. People flooded the comments. "So sorry you're going through this, Kitana. You guys are so strong." Some people just love drama. Good for you for setting boundaries. Cut the toxicity. Blood doesn't equal love. I read them all, one by one, like knives dragged slowly across my skin. But it wasn't the strangers that hurt most. It was the relatives. My niece, Maria, commented a string of hearts. My cousin's daughter reposted it with her own caption. Been there? Some mills never want to let go? No one asked for my side. Not one. I sat down on the kitchen floor, my groceries forgotten, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. I hadn't cried when Valerio hung up on me. I hadn't cried when Katana and he stormed out of my house without a backward glance. But this? This was exile. A public flogging with pastel hashtags. My phone buzzed again. More notifications. More people weighing in on a narrative I hadn't written. I turned off the ringer. Disabled the Facebook app. Blocked Katana. And then I curled up on the sofa and did something I hadn't done in years. I hid. Not physically. I didn't have the luxury. But emotionally. I pulled the blinds halfway closed, unplugged the landline, ignored the doorbell when it rang that evening. Let them think what they wanted. Let them spread their version. I was too tired to fight it. I didn't eat dinner that night. I sat in silence. The only sound the gentle whir of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of my old bones shifting beneath me. I tried not to think about the comments, about how easily people are swayed when the lie is dressed in curated sorrow. I was staring blankly at the wall when my cell rang again. I almost didn't answer, but then I saw the name. Julie, my sister. I answered on the second ring, my voice already thick. Hello? Liana, she said softly. I just saw Katana's post. What happened? It wasn't a demand. It wasn't laced with judgment. It was just concern. Kind, honest concern. And it undid me. I let out a shaky breath. She lied, I whispered. She spun it all into something grotesque. Tell me everything, Julie said. From the beginning. And so I did. I told her about the text, about the mortgage, about the conversation in my living room where I finally stood up for myself, about how the internet now believed I was some vengeful matriarch punishing her poor, innocent son. Julie listened. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a silence on the other end of the line. Then she said, Good for you. I blinked. What? You finally said no. Liana, do you know how long I've watched you bend yourself into knots to keep their love? Do you know how long you've sacrificed without thanks? I didn't want it to come to this, I murmured. I wanted to matter. You do matter, she said fiercely. And not one Facebook post changes that. That night, I slept with the phone by my side. Not because I expected more calls, but because, for the first time in days, I remembered that someone still saw me. Not a villain, not a monster, just a woman, a mother, and a sister. And that was something Katana could never take away. Grief has many forms. It isn't always loud or wet with tears. Sometimes, it's just the quiet realization that someone you love has been slipping away from you for years, and you were too busy loving them to notice. That morning, I didn't dress. I didn't fix my hair or even open the curtains. I sat at the dining room table in my robe, bare-faced, surrounded by the ghosts of paper memories. A woman unraveling slowly, but not aimlessly. I opened the bottom drawer of the sideboard, the one no one touched but me. Inside was a plastic organizer filled with cards, letters, and receipts. My archive of love, motherhood, and silent sacrifices. At first, I'd kept them out of nostalgia. Then, I think, out of hope. Now I opened them for something else. Clarity. The first envelope I pulled out was from Valerio's high school graduation. Inside was a photo of him in his cap and gown, arms flung around me in a hug so tight it nearly choked me. My lipstick had smudged on his collar, and he hadn't even minded. There was a note folded into the photo. We did it, Mom. Everything I am is because of you. I placed it carefully on the table, beside a Mother's Day card from when he was in college. He'd drawn a little cartoon of us on the front, stick figures and all, and inside he'd written, Thank you for always being there, for every phone call, every casserole, every dollar when I was too proud to ask, but you knew anyway. I smiled as I read it, but it hurt. That kind of love, pure, unfiltered, grateful, had vanished like morning mist. I hadn't heard those words in years. The next card was from Katana, one of only 3 she ever gave me. Thanks for helping with the wedding flowers. You saved the day. Katana. No warmth, no love. Not even a love Katana. Just efficient acknowledgement. A woman managing public relations. Even then, I remember thinking, she doesn't want to bond with me. She wants to keep me close enough to use, far enough not to owe. I continued sorting. Dozens of receipts, all in my name. Checks written to their wedding caterer, florist, and the venue deposit. I found the note from Valerio that came with the down payment transfer for their house. You're a lifesaver, Mom. We'll never forget this. But they did. Soon after the housewarming party, the dinner invitations stopped. After the first furniture shipment, Katana began declining my calls with polite texts. Busy right now. Can we talk later? Later rarely came. The timeline was clear. Every financial gift was a marker, a milestone in my erasure. When they were first engaged, Valerio called twice a week. We had Sunday dinners. I was consulted on table linens and centerpieces. I was seen. After the honeymoon, I helped fund. The weekly calls became monthly. After the house, they stopped entirely. In place of connection, I got responsibilities. A transfer on the first of every month. A text here and there about helping with the AC repair, or jumping in just until the bonus comes through. They didn't need my advice. They didn't need my presence. They needed my wallet. And I had obliged. Not because I was naive, but because I clung to the hope that each act of giving might bring me back into the fold, might earn me a seat at the table again. Instead, I was slowly, meticulously replaced. And here was the final insult. The more I gave, the less I existed in their world. I picked up a photo from their baby shower, one I hadn't been invited to. Kitana had told me it would just be a girls' brunch with her friends. The photo had surfaced online later, and there she was, surrounded by both their families, her side and Valerio's cousins. But not me. I hadn't said a word. I'd sent flowers and a check for the crib instead, because I was still trying, still hoping that love and loyalty would be enough. I leaned back in my chair and felt the fatigue of years press against my chest. The way my own history had been rewritten, not with violence, but with erasure. Quiet exclusions, deliberate forgettings. Love, it turns out, does not always shout. But neglect. Neglect is silent. And deadly. I stood and walked to the hallway closet, where I kept old tax records and financial statements. I pulled out folders from the last 5 years. My pen had been my son's lifeline. I had contributed over $58,000 to their marriage, not as loans, but as gifts. Birthdays, emergencies, renovations, replacing Katana's car after she wrapped it around a mailbox, new appliances, private preschool applications they never told me the outcome of. I added up each line item on a yellow legal pad. 58,472, or 86. No repayments, no gratitude, only distance. And now, defamation. I placed the financial records neatly back in the folder, then carefully slid the letters and cards into a box I labeled, "For me." A box I would keep, not because I needed evidence, but because I needed to remember I hadn't imagined the love that once existed. It had been real. It was just no longer mine. The birds finally chirped at the window around noon, tentative little sounds against the silence. I poured water into their feeder, set down some crumbs, and stood there in the sunlight for a long time, watching them flutter and fight for space. A small voice inside me whispered, "You gave them everything." Another voice answered, stronger this time, "And now you'll give yourself what's left." I nodded slowly, not in sorrow, but in resolve. It started with a number I didn't recognize. Private, out of state. The sort of call I normally would have ignored, especially after the week I'd had. But something, call it intuition, call it divine intervention, told me to answer. "Hello?" I said, wary. Hi, is this Liana Bellini? A woman asked, her voice cautious but not hostile. Yes. Who is this? My name is Claire. I'm Katana's sister. Silence stretched between us. I know this is probably the last call you were expecting, she rushed on, but I saw Katana's post, and everything that's happening, and I can't keep quiet anymore. I was sitting at the kitchen table, my tea gone cold. My chest tightened, but I didn't say anything. I know she's painted a certain picture of you, Claire said gently, but I wanted you to hear from someone who's lived it too. You're not alone in this. I blinked hard. What do you mean? She did the exact same thing to our stepfather, Claire said, her voice a mix of shame and quiet rage. Took his generosity, twisted it, then turned around and told everyone he was controlling, that he was manipulative. She made it seem like he was the problem, when all he ever did was try to support our family. My throat tightened. Claire continued. At first, she played the victim, said he treated her differently, that he was too strict. Then she started cutting him out of things. Birthday dinners, vacations. She'd say he didn't want to come. Meanwhile, she was the one excluding him. And then, when he finally stopped giving her money, she said it was proof he didn't care. She flipped the entire family against him. He died last year, and they barely spoke in the end. A cold, familiar ache spread across my ribs. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm watching her do it again, Claire said simply. And I couldn't stay silent this time. My eyes burned. She told Valerio you refused to have a birthday party last year, Claire went on. She said you didn't want the attention, that you were overwhelmed and didn't want to make a fuss. But that's not true, is it? My voice cracked. No, I waited all day. I even baked my own cake. Claire let out a breath like she'd been punched. I helped plan that party, she said. Katana asked me to look into venues, suggested a guest list, even a menu. We were going to do it at that garden cafe near their house. But 2 weeks before your birthday, she texted me and said to cancel everything, that you were acting needy, and she didn't want to encourage it. I closed my eyes as nausea washed over me. She told Valerio you canceled it, Claire said. She made it sound like you were unstable, too emotional to handle it, that she was protecting you from disappointment. I believed her. I'm so sorry. She paused, then added, I still have the messages, if you want them. I did. I desperately did. But I couldn't speak. I'll send them, she said gently. No pressure. But I thought you should know. You've been lied to. Gaslit. Just like he was. 5 minutes after we hung up, the screenshots came through. The first one was from 3 weeks before my birthday. Can you cancel the reservations for the party? I changed my mind. Claire replied, Why? I thought everything was confirmed? Katana. She's already fishing for attention. If we throw her a party, she'll think she's the center of the family again. Another message from a few days later. I told Val she said no to a celebration. He's disappointed, but what can you do? She's too dramatic these days. Then a final one. The day before my birthday. Just post something sweet on Facebook, so it looks like we did our part. No need for her to come over. I scrolled through them slowly, my fingers trembling. There it was. The truth. She hadn't just excluded me, she had erased me. And in my place, she'd planted a narrative of instability, emotional fragility, and irrational jealousy. I wasn't just not invited. I was rebranded as the family burden, the dramatic one, the one who ruined her own birthday. I pressed my hand to my mouth and sobbed. Not loud, not broken, but raw. Wounded. I sat there for a long time, the house still around me, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the silence. Eventually, I stood and walked to the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me looked older today. Her eyes red-rimmed, her mouth tight. But beneath the grief was something else. Steel. I believe you, Claire had said before we hung up. And if there's anything I can do, just say the word. Maybe she was the only one, maybe not. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel entirely alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something new. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But clarity. And from clarity came power. When I opened the door and saw Valerio standing there, I barely recognized him. His face was drawn, the kind of tired that no sleep could fix. His clothes were rumpled, like he'd gotten dressed in the dark. His hair wasn't combed. His eyes, God, his eyes were swollen, red at the edges. He looked like a man who had walked through a storm he hadn't even known he was in. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice low. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside. He entered the house like it wasn't familiar anymore, as if it were a place he hadn't truly seen in years. He looked at the living room as though it had changed, though I hadn't moved a piece of furniture since he left home. I don't know where to begin," he said. "Then sit," I replied softly. "And listen." I led him into the dining room, where the table was already covered with the artifacts of our fractured history. I hadn't cleaned it up. Something in me knew he'd come eventually, knew the moment would arrive when the truth would demand to be heard. Valerio took a seat and stared. Cards, letters, photos, bank statements, screenshots. His life, my love, a mother's entire emotional and financial legacy, laid bare between us. "This is everything," I said. "Everything I've kept. Everything I gave." He picked up one of the cards from his freshman year of college. I saw him read the message twice. "Mom, thank you for the care packages. You're the reason I believe in myself." He blinked quickly, then picked up the receipt for the down payment on their house. My name printed clearly on the wire transfer form. He looked up. "You said this wasn't a loan." "It wasn't." He kept moving, his fingers trembling slightly now. A copy of the $200 I sent when Katana wrecked her car. A series of texts from me over Christmas 2 years ago, asking when they'd arrive. No replies. A photo of us from his 25th birthday, his arm slung around my shoulder, the candles still lit on the cake in front of us. Then I handed him the manila envelope. "Claire sent these," I said, "after she saw the Facebook post." He opened it slowly. He read in silence. Katana's words, printed and preserved in cold black ink. "She's already acting like the matriarch. I need to shut this down. Told Val she didn't want a party. He bought it, obviously. If she shows up with another helpful check, I swear I'll scream." Valerio stared at the page like it was written in a language he'd never seen before. I watched the denial leave his body in slow motion. He didn't protest, didn't excuse, just slowly lowered the page onto the table and rested his forehead in his hands. "Oh, God," he whispered. The sound was hoarse, like someone choking on something too big to swallow. "She's been doing this for years," I said gently, twisting what I say, rewriting my intentions. "And I let her. I let you believe her, because I thought if I loved you both enough, I wouldn't need to prove anything." He didn't lift his head. "I thought I was protecting my family by keeping the peace," I said. "But all I did was make it easier for her to push me out. With every check, I gave her another brick to build the wall between us." He finally looked up. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I knew you wouldn't hear me," I said. "Not when it came to her." He looked back down at the pages, his eyes darting, as if some part of him still hoped the story might shift. But truth doesn't bend. "I want to call her," he said suddenly. "Now?" "Yes. Here, with you." "Are you sure?" He nodded, jaw tight. "If I don't ask her in front of you, I'll never get the truth." I nodded. He took out his phone, hands shaking now. Dialed. Put it on speaker. Katana answered on the second ring, her voice saccharine and laced with faux concern. "Babe? Are you okay? You didn't come home last night. I've been texting." "Did you lie to me about my mother's birthday?" he said flatly. Silence. "Val, I don't understand. Did you tell Claire to cancel a party and then tell me Mom didn't want one?" "Why are you— What is this?" "I have the messages, Katana. Your messages." Still silence. "Tell me the truth," he said, voice hardening. Did you do it? She exhaled, and for a moment, I thought she might tell the truth. But then the tone changed. Valerio, whatever Claire gave you, it's out of context. You know how she twists things. She's always resented me. She sent me screenshots, Katana. I was trying to protect you, she snapped suddenly. Your mother suffocates you. She's always in our business, always judging. I just wanted some space. You wanted space from the woman who paid for our house? She offered. Don't make it sound like I forced her. You took everything from her, and you turned me against her in the process. That's not fair, she said, now on the edge of hysteria. This is between us. Don't do this in front of her. This is our marriage. Valerio stared at the phone for a long beat. Then he hung up and let the silence sit. His shoulders sagged, as if the weight of the past 5 years had finally collapsed onto his spine. I believed everything she said, he murmured. Every little manipulation. You wanted to believe the best in her, I said. That's not a crime, it's love. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. I don't know how to fix this. You start by facing it, I said. And you just did. He put his head in his hands again. I was so blind. No, I said, reaching across the table. You were just trusting. That's what children are supposed to do. You just trusted the wrong person. For the next few minutes, we sat in the quiet aftermath. Not healed, not whole, but facing the truth together. And that, finally, was a beginning. She arrived like she always did, loud, uninvited, and convinced of her righteousness. The front door burst open with a slam that rattled the hallway mirror. Kitana didn't knock, didn't pause to catch her breath. She stormed into my house like she owned it, fury radiating from her in waves. Valerio! She shouted, her heels pounding against the hardwood like gunshots. Where the hell are you? I didn't rise from my chair. I simply looked at her. She found us in the dining room, exactly where she must have expected. Me at the table, and her husband beside me, stone-faced and quiet. Her eyes immediately locked onto the spread of papers, photos, and evidence laid out between us. I watched the moment she realized what was happening. You told her, she said slowly, her voice trembling with rage. You showed her everything. Valerio didn't respond right away. He stood tall, but his fists were clenched at his sides. His silence was louder than any accusation. Kitana turned her fury on me. What lies did you feed him this time, huh? What twisted little sob story? She didn't have to lie, Valerio interrupted, finally speaking. She just showed me your words. She froze. His voice was calm, but there was a tremor beneath it, the kind that comes when a dam begins to break. He held up the printed text messages from Claire. You told my aunt to cancel Mom's party. Then you told me she refused to have one. You made her out to be unstable, jealous, even cruel. Her jaw dropped, and for a long moment she said nothing. But her silence didn't last. Oh my God, she said, letting out a sharp, forced laugh. You're seriously falling for this? Some screenshots. You don't even know if they're real. Claire's always hated me. She forwarded them from her phone, Valerio replied coolly. They're time-stamped, and they match what you said to me. Kitana's mask began to crack. You don't get it, she snapped. I was trying to protect you. She was suffocating you, Valerio. Always calling, always asking questions, inserting herself into everything. I needed space. You needed lies, he said, and you built them into a wall between me and my mother. Her eyes welled with tears. I knew the act. I'd seen it in flashes over the years. Those moments when she sensed things slipping from her grasp and reached for the last weapon she had. I gave up so much for this family, she said, her voice warbling. I moved away from my friends, my job, my life. I spent years trying to be the perfect wife, and I never got anything back except criticism and comparisons to her. She gestured toward me like I was an intruder in my own home. I was always second place, she cried. She made me feel like an outsider, Like no matter what I did, I'd never be good enough for you. I made you feel like an outsider? I finally said, my voice calm, low. While I was paying your bills, replacing your car, and wiring money every time you two so much as sneezed too hard? Katana shot me a look filled with venom, but I didn't flinch. I stayed quiet, I continued, through every missed call, every skipped dinner, every holiday I spent alone. Not because I didn't notice, but because I loved my son, and I was willing to endure anything if it meant keeping the peace. Her eyes darted back to Valerio, desperately. Please don't do this, she whispered. Please don't let her turn you against me. He looked at her long and hard. You did that yourself, he said. One lie at a time. She staggered back a step like he'd slapped her. Then came the next act. Her body collapsed into a chair, hands flying to her face as she burst into sobs. I didn't mean to, she gasped. I was scared, okay? I thought I was losing you. She's always had a hold on you, and I was scared you'd never really be mine. You were never competing, Valerio said. She's my mother. That love was never a threat to you. You made it one. He turned toward me then. And I let her, he added, his voice lower now. For years. I believed her without asking. I dismissed you, sided with her. And I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I felt the weight of those words settle in my chest. I didn't respond, not yet. My eyes stayed on Katana. She was still crying, but it felt hollow, mechanical. Her face buried in her hands, but not a single tear touched her blouse. Are you leaving me? She asked, voice trembling. Valerio hesitated. His eyes flickered with pain. No, he said. I'm not leaving. But I'm not living in your fiction anymore. She looked up, startled. I want the truth from now on, he said. And if that means spending more time with my mother, you'll deal with it. If it means calling out lies, I'll call them out. I'm done walking on eggshells. Katana looked between us like she no longer recognized either of us. The power she once wielded had crumbled at her feet. I think you should go home, he added. Her lip quivered. You're staying here? For now, yes. The silence that followed was the loudest moment of the night. Katana stood slowly, stiffly. She didn't speak to me, didn't even look at me. She grabbed her purse, her composure cracking with every step, and walked out of the house the way she came in. Uninvited, unwanted, undone. The door shut behind her with a thud. Valerio slumped into the chair across from me and buried his face in his hands. I don't even know who I've been living with. You know now, I said. He looked at me, eyes raw. I want to make things right. I nodded. That begins today. And it had. Grief doesn't always come in one blow. Sometimes it's a slow suffocation, one betrayal after another, each cutting a little deeper until you no longer recognize your own reflection. It was a Tuesday morning when I found the envelope. It wasn't bulky, no warning, just thin, white, with my name typed in bold across the front. I opened it expecting another bill, perhaps a stray medical notice. Instead, I found a summons. Katana Margot Bellini vs. Liana Faye Bellini. Lawsuit. 3 counts. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, financial manipulation, and interference in a marital relationship. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the words, my breath gone. Not because I feared it, no, I had weathered far worse, but because of the audacity, the gall of a woman who had stolen not just my son, but years of my life and thousands of dollars, now daring to claim that I had harmed her. When Valerio arrived later that day, he found the documents on my counter. What the hell is this? He asked, flipping through the pages with growing horror. She filed yesterday, I said quietly, claiming psychological damage. She says I've sabotaged your marriage. He stared at the paper like it might set fire to his hands. This is insane. It's a tactic, I said. She's escalating. She knows she's losing control. He looked at me, and in that moment, I saw it. that familiar flicker of shame, the weight of every choice he hadn't questioned, the realization that the woman he defended all these years had become a stranger with sharp teeth. That night, he filed for divorce. There was no yelling, no drama, just a quiet visit to his lawyer's office, followed by a frozen dinner alone at my kitchen table. When I asked if he was all right, he said, "I feel hollow." But Katana wasn't finished. The very next morning, Valerio went to check their joint bank account, only to find it emptied. Every penny, gone. The checking account, the savings, even the emergency stash he had tucked away quietly after their first year of marriage, all drained. She had moved swiftly, precisely. She had planned for this. She had never, not once, truly believed their marriage would last. He came home pale, shaking. "It's all gone," he said. "Everything." Then came the real storm. His friends stopped calling. At first, he thought they were giving him space. But then came the messages, polite, vague, carefully worded. "We're thinking of you both," or "We're so sorry things didn't work out." But they weren't thinking of him. They were thinking of her. Katana had reached them first, with her side of the story. Tearful and trembling, she had painted herself as the wounded wife, abandoned by a manipulative mother-in-law and a husband too weak to see it. Valerio's social circle disintegrated overnight. The couple who stood beside them at their wedding blocked him on Instagram. A former roommate sent a single-line text, "Don't contact me again." Even the church, the same one where we had baptized him, where Katana once insisted they volunteer to build community, distanced themselves. When he sat in the back pew one Sunday, alone, the pastor barely nodded at him. No one sat beside him, not even during the peace offering. "They believe her," he said quietly. "They believe the one who got there first," I replied. He nodded. And for the first time in his life, my son was alone. No friends, no wife, no church. Just me. At night, I heard him pacing in the guest room. Sometimes I heard the muffled sobs he tried to stifle in the pillow. Other times, silence. And that was worse. But something was happening to him. Each morning, he rose earlier. He stopped trying to explain the story to others. He deleted his social media accounts, not out of defeat, but self-preservation. He began journaling every day, handwriting his shame and sorrow into lined notebooks he never let me read. He walked every afternoon, 5 miles, then 10. He cooked. He cleaned. He offered to mow the neighbor's lawn. He read scripture again, not to find comfort, but to wrestle with pain. He told me, one night over dinner, that he hated who he had become in that marriage. "She made me small," he said. "But I let her. Because it was easier to be told what to think than to ask who I really was." I didn't try to absolve him. He wasn't looking for that. He was finally learning that pain, when faced honestly, can be the most brutal teacher and the most effective one. "I lost everyone," he said once. "You found yourself," I said. He smiled then. Just a little. The lawsuit still loomed over me. Her name still hovered like a stain in his life. But Valerio had stopped running, stopped justifying, and started growing. And as a mother, I couldn't ask for more. Autumn was halfway gone when the truth found us. It had been nearly 5 months since Katana filed that absurd lawsuit, and the divorce proceedings had slowed into a cold, grinding crawl. The air outside had taken on that bitter, smoky scent of November, the kind that smelled like endings. Valerio had changed in those months. Quietly, without ceremony. He didn't laugh much, but he didn't flinch anymore either. He walked a little straighter, as if bearing the full weight of his past had somehow made him stronger. He still lived out of boxes in the guest room, still brewed weak coffee, still kept a copy of her lawsuit on his nightstand like a strange kind of penance. We were in the middle of repainting the kitchen when the email came. No subject line, no explanation. Just a sender name, Sabrina Moreau. I remembered her, barely. Katana's former roommate. The girl with the loud laugh and red lipstick. the one who had vanished mysteriously from their lives around year 2 of the marriage. When I'd once asked what happened, Kitana dismissed her with a wave. Toxic, she'd said. Couldn't handle boundaries. Apparently, Sabrina remembered differently. The email contained one zip file. Inside, 47 screenshots, 6 PDFs, one voice memo, and a single line of text. I can't stay silent anymore. She's done this before. She'll do it again. I watched as Valerio opened the folder, one file at a time, his face pale, then red, then hollow. The screenshots were damning. Years of messages between Kitana and various friends, carefully crafted campaigns of sabotage, each more shocking than the last. Just need to get past this monthly check phase. After that, I'll tell him she made me uncomfortable and we'll fade her out. Honestly, if I had to spend another Christmas listening to her guilt trip him, I might have poisoned the turkey. He won't listen to reason unless I play the long game. Let him believe it's his idea to pull away. That's how you win. There were jokes at my expense, mocking the way I dressed, the way I called on Sundays, my needy widow energy, as she wrote once to a friend named Melissa. But it was the voice memo that ended the charade. Kitana's voice. Clear. Cold. She's easy to manage. Just throw her a compliment, and she thinks you're family. Honestly, I'd rather she keep sending checks and not show up to anything. Less cleanup afterward. Valerio listened to it 3 times. His expression never changed. He printed everything on heavy white stock paper and walked it into his attorney's office the next morning. The effect was immediate. The lawsuit Kitana had filed against me evaporated within a week, quietly dropped without prejudice. No apology, no explanation, just silence, like it had never happened. But it had. And now the court knew. The divorce proceedings shifted overnight. Kitana's attorneys looked as though the ground had been pulled from beneath their feet. Suddenly, the woman they'd framed as a loving, mistreated wife was exposed as a manipulator, calculating, cruel, and staggeringly arrogant. They tried to spin it, tried to say the messages were venting, that the voice memo was taken out of context. But the judge didn't buy it. Valerio sat beside me the day of the ruling, eyes fixed ahead, fists loosely clenched in his lap. The judge was firm, even. Clear. This court finds no evidence to support the plaintiff's claims for spousal support or division of assets. Furthermore, the conduct displayed by the plaintiff suggests a pattern of emotional manipulation. No alimony, no claim on the house, no post-divorce maintenance. Kitana stood as still as stone in the courtroom, her mouth agape, her fingers trembling as the verdict was read. She didn't look at Valerio. Not once. When the session ended, she turned sharply and walked out without a word. The woman who had arrived in my life wearing faux humility and perfume left stripped of her performance, with only silence trailing behind. Valerio and I didn't speak until we reached the car. He sat in the passenger seat, staring out the windshield, keys still clutched in his palm. She would have taken everything, he said, almost to himself. If she'd gotten away with it, she would have left me with nothing, no money, no home, no family. I looked at him. She already tried, I said, but you came back before she could finish. He sold the house 2 weeks later. The realtor said it would be easier if I wasn't present, but I insisted. I wanted to see it, one last time. The place I had helped him buy. The home I had never been welcome in. The empty rooms echoed when we walked through. Her perfume still lingered faintly in the master bathroom. We didn't say much as we packed the final boxes. He found one of my old birthday cards buried in a drawer. Unopened. He tucked it into his coat pocket without a word. The sale closed quickly. He handed me a check for half the profit the day after. You don't owe me anything, I said. It's not about owing, he replied. It's about recognizing what was true. You were always there, even when I wasn't. He moved into a modest apartment 2 neighborhoods over. Clean, simple, paid in full. He bought second-hand furniture, stocked the shelves with books, and planted basil in the window. He made dinner for us every Sunday. He started tutoring at a youth center. He kept the court papers in a locked drawer, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder. And one evening, just as the sun was dipping behind the hills, he said something that stayed with me. I used to think she was the strong one. That strength was about control. But you were the strong one, Mom. Because you loved me, even when I didn't deserve it. He reached across the table and took my hand. I see that now. I see you now. And for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not out of grief, but relief. Because the boy I had once rocked to sleep, who I'd lost to love's illusion, had finally come home to himself. Some people cannot stand to lose. They can lose money, homes, relationships, but not control. For them, truth isn't something to face, but something to conquer. And Kitana was one of those people. Even after the courtroom verdict was handed down, no alimony, no property, no public sympathy, she wouldn't disappear quietly. Her pride wouldn't let her. She re-emerged online weeks later. Not as herself, of course. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she reinvented the story. Anonymous message boards, forums about narcissistic mothers-in-law, Instagram reels of soft-voiced narrations over moody piano music, explaining how to spot emotional abusers hiding behind generosity. All cloaked under vague aliases, but her writing style was unmistakable. Dramatic, self-pitying, saturated with half-truths and revisionist fantasy. In this new version, she was a brave woman who had escaped the grip of a jealous, widowed matriarch who had groomed her son into codependency. The financial support? A leash. The birthday party? An event I tried to plan that she sabotaged with last-minute manipulation. But it didn't go as she hoped. A few people nodded along, yes. There's always someone who prefers fiction over fact. But the tide had changed. People who had once admired her now knew better. They remembered the court documents, the withdrawn lawsuit, the screenshots, the voice memo, and Sabrina, Kitana's former friend turned reluctant whistleblower, had remained quiet until Kitana brought her up by name. That was her mistake. Sabrina posted a video. Just her, in a cardigan, no makeup, no filters. She explained everything, the manipulation, the lies, how Kitana used sob stories to isolate people and gaslight them into compliance. She included documents, dates, screenshots. I was her friend, she said, until I watched her plan how to destroy a woman just for existing. Liana never did anything but try to love them, and Kitana couldn't stand it. The video went viral, small-town viral, but viral enough. Within a week, Kitana deleted every post, every account. But it didn't end there. In a final act of desperation, she sent a formal letter to my house, typed, signed. It was a 3-page apology, laced with so many qualifications and veiled accusations that it felt more like a performance than repentance. It ended with, I hope you can find it in your heart to stop poisoning Valerio against me. He deserves peace. We both do. I folded the letter once and slid it into a drawer I don't open anymore. Valerio read it too. He didn't respond. Because he was done. The real final act happened on a warm day in late spring. The tulips I planted the year before had bloomed brilliantly, fiery red, defiant in their beauty. I was tending to them when I heard the sound of gravel under tires. I stood slowly, wiping dirt from my gloves, and saw the unmistakable shape of Kitana's silver car pull into the drive. She stepped out cautiously, dressed in her usual white, designer shoes, lipstick too bright for the daytime. I said nothing. She walked up, stopping short of the porch steps. I want to talk, she said. No. It's important. I doubt that, I said calmly, and turned back to my tulips. She stood there, stunned. The woman who once controlled the narrative had no script now. No audience, no stage. I just think you need to understand how much damage you've caused, she said coldly. You turned Valerio against me. You destroyed our family. I didn't look at her. I clipped a browned leaf and tossed it in the compost bin. I didn't turn him, I replied. You drove him. She blinked, then stepped forward. You're a bitter woman clinging to her son because she has nothing else. That finally made me pause. I stood, looked her dead in the eye. No, I said. I'm a mother who loved too much, stayed silent too long, and finally stopped apologizing for the truth. You didn't lose Valerio because of me. You lost him because he finally saw you. Kitana's face twisted. Rage, shame, disbelief. You think you've won. There's no winning here, I said. Only surviving. And you can't do that until you stop rewriting the story. She turned sharply, her heels slipping slightly in the gravel. She got into her car without another word and drove off, the sound of her departure more pitiful than dramatic. I haven't seen her since. The months that followed were the quietest of my life. Valerio settled into his new apartment. He volunteers at a literacy program now, teaching adults to read. He laughs again. He sings in the car, badly. He visits every Sunday, no invitations needed. We cook, we sit, we live. The fear is gone. There's no more walking on eggshells, no more waiting for a text that won't come, no more shrinking to make space for a woman who never deserved it. I still keep the photos, the letters, even the lawsuit papers, not as a shrine to pain, but as proof that survival is possible, that love, once crushed and cast aside, can bloom again. Sometimes when I look out at the tulips, I think of how they looked that spring, the spring when the mask finally fell, when the storm passed and the garden grew, quietly, boldly, on its own terms. Mother's Day arrived like a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The sun filtered gently through the windows. No calls, no buzzing phone, no emails, just a stillness I hadn't known in years. I got up early, made tea, and sat quietly in the kitchen, watching the light stretch slowly across the floor like it was reminding me, you are allowed to be at peace. Last year, I had sat here too. But then it was different. Last year, I held a crumpled text message and cried quietly while pretending I wasn't. I'd stared at the empty place setting I used to prepare for Valerio on these days and told myself I didn't care. I'd lied to myself the way he had been lied to by her. But this year, I expected nothing, and that somehow felt like freedom. Around 9:30 a.m., I heard a knock at the door. A gentle, unhurried knock. The kind of knock that asks permission instead of demanding entrance. When I opened it, Valerio stood there, smiling. His eyes were clear. His face no longer carried the weight of shame. He looked like himself again, not the shell that had come home months ago, but my son. My real son. He held out a bouquet of lilacs. "Happy Mother's Day," he said. My heart fluttered, and I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. "You remembered." He gave me a mock-offended look. How could I forget? I laughed, then cried a little. He stepped in and gave me a long hug, one that didn't rush, didn't shrink away. It felt like the kind of hug we hadn't shared since he was a teenager, and still believed I could fix everything. He handed me a box, carefully wrapped in soft blue paper. I unwrapped it slowly, hands trembling. Inside was a simple black frame. A photo, faded but beautiful, of the two of us at the county fair, years ago. I was wearing a ridiculous sun hat. He had cotton candy on his cheek. We were both laughing so hard, our eyes were shut. I gasped. "Where did you find this?" "It was at the bottom of an old drawer," he said. "I almost threw it out without looking." I traced the glass with my fingers. "We look happy." "We were," he said softly. "And I want that again." He hesitated, then added, "There's more. I made a reservation for lunch. That riverside place you like? The one with the garden patio?" My heart swelled. "Of course!" "But first," he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small set of keys. "I bought a house," he said. I froze. "It's small," he added quickly, "but it's mine. Just a few blocks from here. A little brick place with a garden out back and creaky stairs. It smells like dust and hope. I laughed through the tears. Dust and hope? He grinned. You'll see what I mean. I touched the keys. You're really staying. I'm not just staying, he said. I'm starting over. I want to build something clean. No debt, no silence, no guilt, and no more strings. I looked at him, blinking. I know I can never undo what happened, he continued, but I don't want our future to be a constant repayment of the past. I don't want to show up only when I feel I've earned it. I nodded slowly, afraid to speak. I want us to talk, he said. I want to ask questions. I want to know what I missed. I want to stop assuming. I want to see you, not just as my mother, but as a person. And I want you to see me, not just as your son to protect, but as a man who made mistakes and is still worth loving. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. I never stopped loving you, I whispered, even when it hurt, even when I was furious, even when I thought I'd lost you. He took my hands. Then let's love each other better now. We spent the rest of the morning talking, about everything. He told me things he had never said aloud before, about the shame he carried, how much he had feared that leaving Katana would mean becoming a failure, how long he had confused obedience with love, how small he had felt, living in a home where his mother was a ghost, his wife a puppeteer, and he himself nothing more than an echo. I told him my truths, too, about the isolation, the quiet grief. The moment I realized that giving too much wasn't love, it was desperation in disguise. About how I stopped living for myself the moment he married Katana, and how I was finally learning to return to myself again. We cried, we laughed, we paused and made tea when it all became too much. And when we arrived at the restaurant, the waitress greeted me with, "Happy Mother's Day," and I smiled with the warmth of someone who had finally remembered her worth. After lunch, he showed me the house. It was modest, beautiful in a way only beginnings are. There were boxes in the corners, paint samples on the walls, and a small porch that caught the afternoon light just right. He handed me a key. "You get your own copy," he said. "No strings attached." And in that simple moment, standing in a doorway, breathing fresh air, I felt something new. Not forgiveness, not closure, but rebirth. This wasn't the son I'd raised. This was the man he chose to become. And for the first time, we were meeting as equals. Without control, without fear, without debt. Just two people who had finally survived each other's worst chapters and were brave enough to write better ones together.